Hey, let's give it up for the worship team real quick. Yeah, that was awesome. That's great. Really good. I have a question for you guys. Can you smell a picture? All right. Now, it kind of sounds weird, right? But you know what I mean. If you see a picture and it's kind of nostalgic, you can actually smell it, right? Let's start off with the first one, popcorn, right? If you go to a movie theater, like you can almost smell the butteriness of this picture, right? Like you can smell the popcorn, right? Or what about this one? Dish soap. Maybe Palmolive specific, right? But whatever you grew up with. Maybe you're doing dishes, your parents, your siblings, like you smell this dish soap and it brings you back, right? This next one's kind of personal for me. My dad was a wildland firefighter growing up, so we would follow him all over the country as he fought fires. And so like the smell of wildfire is just like innate in my nostrils. Like I smell it and it takes me back, right? Maybe it's just a campfire for you guys, right? But if you live in the Pacific Northwest, you know what a wildfire smells like, right? You see this picture and your lungs are starting to hurt. Am I right? Yeah, all right. This one, right, the pine tree, maybe it's a Christmas tree, maybe you're in the forest, right? You can like see the picture, you can almost smell the pine, right? Or what about this one? Take it in for a moment. Think about like if you've ever been to a dump, right? You see this landfill. I mean, you look at the picture, you can almost smell the heavy aroma as it's weighing you down, right? Like if you've been to a dump, you know what this smells like. So I want you to keep this image in mind, and I want you to ask yourself, have you ever been called trash at something? I know I have, actually. My students remind me most of the time that I'm trash at most things, right? Fair. Or if you've ever played basketball with me, when I finally make it onto a team and the team lets out a collective, ugh, right? You know I'm trash at basketball, right? So we're going to do a little bit of an exercise this morning to wake you up. I know what it's like to be in these chapels, super tired and just want to be in bed, right? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and I want you to turn to your neighbor and just tell them something silly that you're trash at. Ready? Go. Ten more seconds. All right, and time. All right, now that we're all feeling bad about ourselves, let's talk about the Bible, all right? Guys, in the very beginning, in Genesis, it talks about how God created the heavens and the earth, right? But it also talks about how the heavens and earth, it was filled with chaos, darkness. It was trash, and God turned it into beauty. Right? In 7 days, God took trash and he turned it into treasure. And the good news is that Jesus actually never stopped turning trash into treasure. I have another question for you guys this morning. How many of you in this room at one point or another have ever felt like trash? And I don't mean something silly like you're bad at basketball. I mean like you, at your core, feel worthless. You feel like trash. Maybe you're in here this morning and you're like, yeah, Brolin, if I'm honest, like that's me right now. I've been struggling with an addiction for as long as I can remember. I thought when I came to Bible college I would break it, but I just can't break it. I feel like trash. My parents got divorced, and to be honest, I've always kind of felt like it was my fault. I feel like trash. My best friend committed suicide, and I couldn't do anything to stop him. I feel like trash. My boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with me, and to be honest, I thought we were going to get married. I could have sworn we were going to get married, but I feel like trash. I'm not as good at worship as that person. My grades aren't as good as this person. I can't preach like that person. I'm not good enough, smart enough, fast enough. I feel like trash. That's you in this room this morning. If you've ever felt like trash, I want you to know that you're not alone. In fact, I would say you're in really good company. Our text this morning comes in 1 Corinthians chapter 4. We're going to dive right in. It says, you think you already have everything you need. You think you're already rich. You have begun to reign in God's kingdom without us. I wish you really were reigning already, for then we would be reigning with you. Instead, I sometimes think that God has put us apostles on display like prisoners of war at the end of a victor's parade, condemned to die. We have become a spectacle to the entire world, to people and angels alike. Our dedication to Christ makes us look like fools. But you claim to be so wise in Christ. We are weak, but you are powerful.
You are honored, but we are ridiculed. Even now we go hungry and thirsty, and we don't have enough clothes to keep warm. We are often beaten and have no home. We work wearily with our own hands to earn a living. We bless those who curse us. We are patient with those who abuse us. We appeal gently when evil things are said about us. Yet we are treated like the world's garbage, like everybody's trash, right up to this present moment. Here's my first point for you guys this morning, and if you're taking notes, you can go ahead and write this down. Trash is the expectation of the kingdom. Paul, he starts off pretty sarcastic with the Corinthian church, right? The Corinthian believers, he says, we look like fools, but you're wise. We are weak, but you are powerful. You are honored, and we are ridiculed. And here's what you need to understand about the Corinthian church. They're powerful. They're successful. They're proud to be from Corinth. They have all the authority and success in the world, and the Corinthian church, they attribute it to the fact that they follow Jesus. Man, we're following Jesus so well, and that's why we're successful. And Paul, he sees this, and he's like, well, wait a second, though, because we're apostles, and we're not treated like that. You guys are successful in reigning as kings because you're following Jesus? And yet here I am, an apostle, and I'm treated like garbage. What's interesting about this word, garbage, is that it's only ever used one time in the New Testament, and it's in these verses. It's perikatharma. Everybody say perikatharma. This word, it means like the scum, the dregs scraped from like a dirty dish or the bottom of a trash can. I mean, you can almost picture it. It's the idea of like this thick, gross, dirty thing you need like a spatula or a spoon to scrape off the bottom of something. It's disgusting. It's garbage. And this is what Paul relates himself to. Figuratively, this word also means like the lowest, most degraded criminals. Criminals who were often sacrificed in pagan ceremonies because they had no worth. They were complete trash. You see, while the Corinthians are living on one end of the spectrum, this is the end of the kings, and they're saying it's because they follow the way of Jesus, Paul, an apostle, is living on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. He relates himself to the scum that needs to be scraped off the bottom of a trash can. He relates himself to the most degraded criminal. He relates himself to a nobody in the eyes of the world. Paul, he's writing to a Corinthian church to remind them that following Jesus is not about gaining worldly success, but losing it. Here's the deal, guys. I believe there are two groups of people in here this morning. First, there are those who try to clean themselves up when they're called to be trash. These are the people who will do anything and everything to be perfect. They will literally work themselves to death so that they can reach their goals. Maybe their goals are to be noticed by a potential job, right? Maybe their goals are just to be noticed by their professors or these authority figures. Maybe they're working themselves to death just to be noticed by their peers. If I'm honest with you guys, this is the group that I fall into. I fall into this trap of working myself to death to try to be perfect just so that I can actually be noticed. I know inside I'm trash, but I clean it up, and I pretend like I'm fine. And if you're like me, if you fall into this group, I want to tell you a secret. And if you're in this group, you probably already know this secret. When you're in this group, you actually still feel like trash. Because the goals that you're setting for yourself are always unreachable and unattainable. And when you don't reach your goals, you feel like a total failure. You feel like the worst kind of person there is, but you clean it up with a smile. You act like you're fine, and you set another unreachable goal until the cycle of hell repeats itself. And at its core, this group of people, it boils down to one word: pride. Because when we seek worldly glory, when we seek glory for ourselves and we fail, we are left with shame. But when we seek kingdom glory, when we do our work to seek glory for God and we fail, we're left with grace. One of my favorite passages in the entire Bible is Jeremiah chapter 45. It talks about a guy named Baruch. And here's what you need to know about Baruch, all right? Baruch is Jeremiah's scribe. And so the Lord would tell Jeremiah something, and Jeremiah would talk to Baruch, and then Baruch would write it down. That's how it goes. And Jeremiah 45 is literally just 4 verses of the Lord speaking to Baruch. But I mean, just imagine this for a minute. Like, you're Baruch, and you're, like, writing it down, and you're like, this is what the Lord says, blah, blah, blah. And then Jeremiah is like, to you, Baruch, and you're like, to you, but wait, what? Like, hold on, pause. What do you mean, Jeremiah? Like, of course you're speaking to me. You do this every time, right? But the text, it actually says something that I think this group of people can really benefit from. It says, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says to you, Baruch. You have said, I am overwhelmed with trouble. Haven't I had enough pain already? And now the Lord has added more. I am worn out from sighing and can find no rest. Baruch, this is what the Lord says. I will destroy this nation that I built. I will uproot what I planted. Are you seeking great things for yourself? Seek them not. I think that John Elmore nails it on the head when he says, like Baruch, the temptation is this, that we would find identity in ministry, notoriety in ministry, that we would find prosperity in ministry, we would find celebrity in ministry. And every idiot and ism that seeks to hold the place that only God should hold, may it never be. You seek great things for yourself, seek them not. And then there's the second group of people in here this morning. Those that already feel like trash, like nobodies. You don't try to clean it up and be perfect because this is just who you are anymore. Even in a large group, you kind of feel alone. You feel like if you were to leave that group, if you were to leave, no one would really notice if you were gone. You feel like nobody can see or even begin to understand the struggle you have behind closed doors. I mean, you don't know how to describe it, but if you're honest, you feel dark. You feel empty. You feel like trash. You feel like nothing. Unloved, unwelcome, unvalued. Nobody wants you. At the end of the day, you're just leftovers scraped from the bottom of the dish. If that's you in here this morning, I need you to hear this. You are exactly who Jesus needs you to be. I love the way that the Passion Version translates 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 27 through 29. It says, but God chose them who the world considers foolish, to shame those who they think are wise. And God chose the puny and powerless to shame the high and mighty. He chose the lowly, the laughable in the world's eyes, nobodies, so that he would shame the somebody. For he chose what is regarded as insignificant in order to supersede what is regarded as prominent. Do you feel foolish? Do you feel puny? Powerless? Low? Laughable? You feel like a nobody? You feel insignificant? I want you to hear this very closely. Jesus Christ, the King of the universe, has chosen you. He has adopted you. He loves you more than you can possibly comprehend. You are chosen. You are welcome. You belong. And I promise you with everything inside of me, you are loved to the ends of the earth. And trust me, I know as a Bible college student sitting in those seats, you're like, Brawlin, I know this. I understand these facts. But I also know what it's like for your heart to not believe this. So maybe just this morning, would you let your heart listen to the whisper of these promises that you are loved even when you think you're trash? That Jesus paid the ultimate price on the cross because he said, you are my child that I literally love to death. You're not puny or powerless. You are significant because of what he did for you. Another way that we see that trash is the expectation of the kingdom is that Paul, after describing himself as garbage, he says, imitate me. Do like I do in verse 16. And the word that Paul uses here for imitate is mimetes. It's actually where we get our word for mimic. And what's really interesting about this word mimic, what's significant about it, is that all 6 times that Paul uses this word mimetes, it's paired with the word ginomai. Everybody say ginomai. Now, ginomai, it means to be created into or to become more like. It's not like a snap of the fingers. It's like a slow process. What I'm trying to say is that Paul was not telling the Corinthian church to mimic his every single word and action, just basically go and be a copy and paste machine. That's not what Paul is saying. No, it's actually Paul is saying, look at my life that has been put on display for everybody to see. I am trash. I am garbage in the world's eyes, and I want you to become like me. I want you to get off of your high horse, and I want you to practice becoming like me. And it's not just something that you can flip a switch and do. Actually, this is discipleship, that you practice becoming lower and lower in the world's eyes so that you can look more and more like a citizen of the kingdom. To imitate Paul, it actually means to slowly become more and more like him. Becoming imitators is a slow and lifelong practice of being sanctified through submission to the Spirit. That's a complex theological sentence, so I'm going to say it one more time. Becoming imitators is a slow, lifelong practice of being sanctified through submission to the Spirit. What's really interesting is another time that Paul uses this word mimetes or mimic is in Ephesians chapter 5. And he's saying, I want you to go out and be imitators of Christ. Which leads me to my second point. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. My final point. Trash is the reflection of the king. I mean, just think for a moment. Isn't it absolutely crazy that the king of the universe, who has all power and all knowledge, who created everything from like the most magnificent beauty in the world to the tiniest little detail on pine needles, stepped down into his creation and chose to be treated like a slave and a criminal? Hunter read it for us earlier, but I think Paul puts it perfectly in Philippians 2, 5 through 8. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself. By taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Guys, Jesus was treated like garbage until his last breath. By multiple groups of people. Jesus was treated like garbage by those closest to him, right? I mean, as Jesus sat around a table with his closest friends and family, and he looks across the table, he sees someone that he knows has already betrayed him, has already turned him into the authorities so that he could go and be treated like garbage. Or as Jesus, the perfect, innocent lamb, is beaten and mocked right outside as Peter denying him because Peter doesn't want to be treated like a Messiah. Peter doesn't want to be treated like trash. Or what about when he breathes his last breath on the cross and the disciples think that they lost? They hadn't listened to anything Jesus had been saying for 3 years, and they thought they were just following some Jewish trash. Jesus wasn't a conquering king. He was trash. Jesus was treated like garbage by those closest to him, but also by the outsiders, right? And the part that really gets me is when Jesus goes before the 600 governor's guards. Matthew talks about this, but basically, Jesus is standing in front of 600 soldiers. I want you to do me a favor in here this morning. I want you to close your eyes and not fall asleep. That's the challenge, all right? Close your eyes. Don't fall asleep. I want you to imagine, put yourself in Jesus' shoes for just a moment. You're standing in front of 600 strangers. Your entire body is throbbing with pain because you were just beaten beyond recognition. When a couple of guys, they grab you and they strip you naked when most likely laughing at you. And when it seems like it couldn't get any worse, a guy walks in carrying a jacket, laughing, and says, "Why don't we put a robe on this king?" And as he drapes it over your shoulders, the crowd returns and erupts with tears of laughter. And another man emerges and he says, "What about his crown and what about his staff?" And he shoves a stick into your hand and thorns into your skull. The crowd reaches its climax as they spit in your face and mockingly kneel before you. In their eyes, you're nothing but Jewish trash. You guys can open your eyes. Not only was Jesus treated like that by outsiders or by those closest to him, but he was actually made himself trash for the benefit of the world. Mark 10 tells us that Jesus, the Son of God, came not to be served, but to serve. To be treated, not to be treated like a reigning king, but instead to serve others and be treated like a lowly slave. And this is actually something that we see throughout Jesus' life and ministry. He came for the poor, the sick, the marginalized, the broken people of the world. And not to be served by them as he's like building up his kingdom, but actually to serve them and remind them that they belong in his kingdom. And Jesus, he didn't only do this for the bottom feeders of society, but even for the Romans who were persecuting his people, right? Whether it's healing a centurion's daughter or telling his followers to carry a Roman pack longer than they actually need to. We see that Jesus, time and time again, made himself trash in the world's eyes. One radical example of this is in John chapter 13. Jesus, again, is sitting at the table before the Passover meal. And as he's looking around at the people that he loves the very most in the world, he stands up from the table and he takes his robe off and he wraps a towel around his waist and he grabs a bucket of water and pours it into a little basin and he kneels down and he tells his disciples to line up. And this king of the universe dips his towel in the dirty water to scrub the mud off of these lowly, broken Jews' feet. And it makes no sense at all. I mean, here's the king of the universe who has never made a mistake in his life, scrubbing mud off of fishermen's feet who don't even belong in his presence. They're trash. And as they're going along, finally it comes to Simon Peter, and Simon Peter understands how ridiculous this is. He goes, "No, Jesus, no way will you ever wash my feet. I'm trash. Jesus, I'm a nobody fisherman that doesn't even belong to see you. You will never wash my feet." And Jesus says, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you won't be mine. And so Peter takes his words back, right? He's like, okay, Jesus, wash every square inch of my body. And there's a whole sermon right there, but here's what I need you to understand. The reason that Jesus did that, the reason that Jesus became trash to the world is so that his followers would actually do the same. It talks about this in verses 14 through 15. It says, and since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to do the same. You ought to wash others' feet. I have given you an example. Do as I have done to you. Not only did Jesus act like trash for the lowly or the Romans or his followers, but he actually acted like trash just by taking on the cross, and he did it for the entire benefit of the world. It doesn't take a Bible college student to know that crucifixion was reserved for the worst, most rugged kind of criminal, the scum of the earth. In fact, the pagans would often refer to these people as garbage or trash. They would use that same word, perikatharma, garbage or trash, to refer to these people. Ronald Youngblood, he puts it this way in the New Illustrated Bible Dictionary. He says, to nearly all people, impalement or crucifixion was the most disgusting form of death, reserved for the biggest threats and the worst criminals, the scum of the earth. God chose trash. God chose to be trash in the world's eyes, as for the first time, God experienced death. If you feel like trash in here this morning, hear this. Trash is the expectation of the kingdom. Trash is the reflection of our King. We benefit by carrying the burden of being trash so that the world can benefit. So what? Are you just supposed to go out and live the rest of your life lowly, as trash in the world's eyes? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Leave this place and be trash. But guys, there's good news that comes along with that. We follow our King and live as trash so that, like him, one day we can pick up our crown and wear our robes as he transforms us into treasure. Jesus, he first wore a crown of thorns and a robe that mocked him. He was treated as trash for the world's benefit, and may we bear the burden of being trash for the benefit of the world. May we live completely encouraged and filled with joy, knowing that even though we're living this life in trash, we're being spit on and mocked, and we're going to have hard lives with no answers. May we live our lives encouraged and filled with joy as we know that we follow the King of transformation. May we live as trash, knowing that one day our King is going to lift us up and turn our trash into treasure because he chooses us. We follow a King who turns trash into treasure. We follow a King who turns a crown of thorns into a crown of victory. He turns a robe of mockery into a robe of majesty. He turns broken, trashy people with trash reputations and trash backgrounds into royalty and adopted heirs of the kingdom with the King of the universe. You're trash, and wear it like a badge of honor, because the world will see you as trash until one day you are transformed as treasure, and they will come alongside you because you chose to be trash. Leave here with this truth on your heart this morning. From the beginning of time, Jesus has been transforming trash into treasure.